Finally, 7:15. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Planning Committee meeting, the 9th of December today. Welcome to members, welcome to officers, and welcome to members of the public, and also to anybody who's watching on our YouTube channel. So I'll proceed straight on with the agenda this evening. Our first item is apologies for absence. We have two apologies this evening from Councillor Bowers and Councillor Bowers-Flint. Councillor Bowers is being substituted by Councillor Prime, and Councillor Bowers-Flint substituted by Councillor Ethan Williams. So welcome to you. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest or other registrable interest relating to items of the agenda having regard to code of conduct for members? No? Okay, thank you. Item 3 of the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. Am I right in thinking, Alison, we don't have the minutes ready for the meeting on the 18th of November, so they will come to us at our next meeting. Item 4 on the agenda is a public question time. We don't have any registered speakers on this item, so we'll move straight on to item 5 on the agenda, which is our planning applications. The first application to be considered this evening is item 5A on the agenda. This is application number 18/02154 full Tanner's Dairy, Prayers Hill, Sybil Headingham, and that is found at page 6 on the agenda. And we do have speakers on this item. So the first speaker, please, is Mr. Nicholas Ellis, who is a resident. Thank you, Mr. Ellis.
Good evening. Yeah, my wife and I are the owners and the occupiers of Priors Hill Cottage, which you may know is one of the 3 properties that is most affected by this proposal, as we're the 3 that lie between the development and the junction with Wethersfield Road. Therefore, I'd point out that although point 1163 in the report states the site has no other residential neighbours, technically our land does neighbour the development because we've got a small strip of land on the far side. However, my comments this evening are about condition 20, and that's what I wish to address. I'll state the question and then add my reasons afterwards. Our question is basically, have any officers or councillors walked from the site to both the schools and the bus stops? And if so, why are the difficulties not raised in the report? So the reasons are basically, if they had undertaken the walk, the questions are, how is that proposed footpath between the development and the manor of Priors to be accommodated? Priors Hill is a narrow road and is actually used for weddings, funerals, events, etc. and services for St Peter's Church. Number 2, it appears that no ecological survey or impact assessment has been carried out on the hedge along the road. 3, both Byway 31 and the rights of way 93 and 33 contain a number of obstacles to walking, especially for those with baby buggies or wheelchairs. In addition, the routes to both schools require crossing busy roads. And the last one, number 4, says condition 20, which says no occupation of the development shall take place until the routes have been provided. What the report does not say is what would happen if the buildings were ready for occupation and during the building time it proved impractical to provide those routes. So my concluding remark is basically that my wife and I are generally support this development as it will bring to an end the antisocial behaviour associated with the site, and it's only this single access issue that really concerns us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. So the next person wishing to speak on this application is Mr. Andrew Watt, who is representing the applicant.
Okay, good evening members and Chair. I'm Andrew Watt of Maze Planning Solutions. I'm the applicant's agent. As the report that's before you explains, the application concerns an allocated brownfield housing development site within the village boundary of Sybil Headingham. The officer recommendation is for approval, and the site-specific issues that are before you have been very well explained in that report. Self-evidently, the site needs to be regenerated. The planning application process has been lengthy, but it's ultimately settled on a good quality scheme that will provide the homes that the council requires to ensure local plan allocations are converted into deliverable schemes to create real homes for the district. I'll add one point into the notes that I sent previously just to assist to respond to the first speaker's comments in relation to the footpath. So the scheme includes a footpath, a new footpath connection to create one which doesn't exist at present, which will connect the site to an existing footpath that peters out by St. Peter's Church. The line that you see on the drawing is not a guess, it's informed by surveys. So we do know that there is adequate space to provide an appropriate footpath there. Yes, it is a little tight, but we're assured by the survey information that there is adequate width. And also the requirements of the County Highway Authority include a request for a financial contribution towards works on the byway that passes the site that we know as Oxford Lane. You may know it the same way. So that's to create some surfacing improvements which will help to make that more usable on a day-to-day basis. I don't have any more points I wish to make or take up any more of your time, so I trust the committee will be able to have a good debate, but ultimately to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. So that brings us to the end of the speakers on this item, and so I will now ask Emily if she'd like to give us her presentation.
Good evening, members. The application before you this evening relates to the demolition of the existing buildings on the site and the construction of 44 dwellings, including the formation of a new site access junction, estate roads, public open space and landscaping. The next slide shows the site location plan, and so the rectangles and boxes marked on this plan are the existing buildings on the site when it was used previously as a dairy. The next slide shows you the site in context of in terms of an aerial photograph, which puts the site in context with the remainder or part of the remainder of the village. So we've got St. Peter's Church down here. This is Weathersfield Road, and this is the junction with Weathersfield Road and Prayers Hill. We've also then got existing residential development of Friars Close and Castle Meadow to the right-hand side here, and then you may be able to make out the main road through Sybil Headingham, Swan Street, that runs here to the right-hand side of the slide. This next slide shows the proposed site layout. So we've got the main spine road, and then the area of yellow is the open space area. The blue area is the wildlife area to protect, be used for reptile housing. The byway, which has been mentioned already in public questions, starts at the bottom here, runs along the right-hand side of the site, around the top corner, and then continues in a northerly direction and ends opposite the secondary school on Swan Street. This smaller plan here shows the amount, the section of new pavement and footpath that will be installed, so to connect the site to the remainder of the village. This is on highway land, and we acknowledge that there will be some hedge removal to accommodate that, but without that the site would not have a reasonable walking route back into the village. This is a larger scale plan of that detail that shows the new footpath that runs from the site, the corner of the site and the byway down to the junction with Wethersfield Road. This next plan shows you the affordable units within the site. So those marked with the red and the blue dots are for affordable rent, and those marked with the pink and turquoise are for shared ownership. And you can see that they are spread evenly throughout the site. This next slide shows the tree removal within the site. As set out within the committee report, much of the trees and hedging within the site is self-sown and has no merit. It is acknowledged that to enable the safe vehicular access to the front of the site, a tree and a section of hedging will be removed to create that. Moving on to the actual internal details of the site. The first street elevation along the top here is what would be visible from Prayers Hill itself, and at this larger gap here is where the main access that runs into the site. The 4 properties in the middle is the development that overlooks the open space, and the bottom section here shows the relationship between plot 11 and Bluebell Cottage, which is the adjacent property along Prayers Hill. The next few slides show you a selection of house types. I haven't included all of them, but they are a selection of detached and semi-detached properties of varying sizes, just to give you a flavour of the style of property that's proposed. I'll run you through those. So this is a pair of, this is a 3-bedroom pair, a detached property, and another detached one, a larger detached house there, and then going back to a 3-bedroom pair. This is a 2-bedroom pair. This is one of the a slightly different arrangement, but a pair of 3-bedroom properties. And then we've got some garaging details as well. The next few slides show you photographs. So on this first slide, these are photographs of where the access would run along Prayers Hill. So this top one with the car in it is looking back down towards the village, and this bottom photograph is looking away from the village where the proposed access would go. The next slides show views across the site, so you can see how overgrown it is in terms of there was a lot of buddleia the last time I went to visit, and you can also see there's a fair amount of concrete that covers the vast majority of the site at the moment. Again, some more photographs to show you internally what's there at the moment within the site. This next slide shows Bluebell Cottage. This photograph, the top photograph, is from within the site, looking towards the southwest. So you can see that Bluebell Cottage does sit on higher land. And then this photograph here again is taken from within the site, but to the northeast. The next two slides show photographs of where the new footpath link would go. So this top photograph here, you can just make out the church and then the junction down here with Weathersfield Road. So the new footpath would run here. And this bottom photograph is closer to the actual site. You can just make out the finger post sign for the byway and then one of the existing dairy buildings in the background there. And then these two photographs show you where the footpath link would go, that's sort of between those 2 points. So just a couple of updates for you. There were some typos within the committee report where the incorrect affordable housing provision was referenced. So at paragraphs 1.4, 6.3, 7, 11.1 and 12.6, reference is made to the site delivering 40% affordable housing. This is incorrect as policy LPP 31 requires 30% housing for sites adjacent to Sybil Headingham. The 30% equates to 13 units, which is being delivered on this site. Also have an update on condition 20, which is the highway works. Part B of condition 20 requires the improvement of 2 bus stops that best serve the site. A query regarding the need for this has been raised by the applicant's agent, and officers are awaiting confirmation from ECC Highways regarding the actual bus stops to be improved. We're waiting to see whether this does need to then be secured by condition. It is recommended that this matter is delegated to officers to resolve post-committee, which would be determined by the response that we receive from ECC Highways. So turning to key considerations, the principle of development is accepted by the site within the village boundary of Sybil Headingham. There's been no objections from statutory technical consultees. It results in the reuse of a brownfield site. Access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale are considered acceptable, and the proposals represent a well-designed scheme delivering 44 units in a key service village. And therefore it's recommended that, subject to the completion of a section 106 to cover the heads of terms outlined within the recommendation section of the committee report, and subject to the conditions and reasons and informatives outlined in Appendix 1 of this committee report, and also subject to the resolution of Part B of Condition 20 as outlined above. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mel. Right, members, over to you. Councillor Bevis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and this is in the ward that I represent. I also chair Sybil Headingham Parish Council. I haven't made a declaration because I'm never there when planning takes place at our Parish Council meetings, so I've certainly had no say at all in the planning application. I do know the site extremely well. I've been a resident there for most of my life, so I do know the site very well. And I do support the application and the merits of what will come from the application as well. I just wanted to ask a few questions actually. On the 30,700, there's an allocation for NHS. It's not sort of crystal clear to me exactly where that's going. I would assume it's going to be part of the new Headingham Medical Centre, which is going to be built out from next year. So just like a bit of clarity around that. The affordable housing I would support, and the additional support going into local education as well. So I'm sort of broadly happy with all of that. Where I'd just like to seek a little bit more understanding is around the byway and the footpath from the byway to connect to the village. And I know this very well because I run this area a lot, and I know the narrowness of that footpath. Also, it's that footpath. It's been reported a lot to the county council. It's crumbling away, and it leads up to the church, and it's really badly deteriorated. Are we being told that...
the existing bit.
Yeah. Are we being told that that whole footpath is going to be renewed? Because that's quite important. I can't imagine that this would go ahead and that work not be done. So that's my first sort of question. My second question is on the byway, again, which I know well. What sort, is this just sort of tidying the byway up or putting down a new surface, or what are the works for that byway? And then I just want to go back to the comments that was made by Mr. and Mrs. Ellis this evening, and just to make sure that we fully understood and picked up the points that they've made as well. And that was also to do with the footpath. So I think we just need a little bit more clarity around that. Before I move anything, I'm happy to hear from other members as well. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Oh, can you pick up those points? Thanks.
So in terms of the request from the NHS, their response is their fairly standard one in terms of where they're seeking to increase capacity for the benefits of patients in the primary care network operating in that area. What they haven't indicated is whether that would specifically go towards the new doctor surgery in Sybil Headingham. I can seek clarification. I don't know, Neil, you might know a bit more in terms of whether or not that's, I mean, it seems sensible that that's where the money would go, but that's just me being sensible in terms of where it would logically go to. Yeah, okay. So moving on to the question about the existing, the state of the existing footpath that runs down from the church toward Wethersfield Road. This application doesn't include any repair works to that. If our, yeah, sure. I see if I.
Because I think that is the...
I'm not sure if I've included. I'm not sure I've included. I've got photographs. I didn't include them within the.
It's on the mapping.
Oh.
If you go back and have a look at the, you did show, with, yeah, there.
Yeah.
So this point here.
Yeah.
So it's that section there that's in a poor state.
Exactly. Yeah.
From my understanding is that would be something that would need to be raised with Essex County Council in terms of a bit like how you would report potholes and things like that. If there's an issue with the existing highway network, that would need to be raised with them so that it can be looked at in terms of whether or not repairs are required. As part of this application, all that's being proposed is that grey section on this slide, which is the new footpath that isn't there at the moment, that would link to the existing one. Well, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does answer the question. What I'm struggling to understand is that deteriorating, crumbling footpath is instrumental in the connection between the new estate and the rest of the village. And I'm struggling to understand how a new footpath is going to be created, and yet the small section of the crumbly old footpath is nothing's going to happen. And I'm just struggling because I know that very, very well, and I just find it difficult to understand why you do that.
Councillor Beavis, perhaps if I just can come in on that point. So it's a completely legitimate concern that you're raising, and obviously it's a logical concern in terms of for the village in terms of the connection. I think obviously when we're considering here is mitigation that's required to make the development as proposed acceptable, and what is acceptable and what is what we are able to secure through Section 106 conditions for mitigation. So I think in this particular case, what's being proposed here provides for that mitigation. If we were to start to say, well, actually, there's a repair and renewal of existing footpath in addition to that, I think we're going beyond what we could reasonably expect the developer to mitigate. So I think it is a matter probably for the County Council as the highway authority, and hopefully as part of this, once that, you're subject obviously to the outcome of the deliberation this evening, but if planning permission was granted, it's the type of thing that hopefully when those works were being done that the County Council would then look to do something in relation to that section of footpath. But I don't think we could justify on planning grounds why that section of renewal needs to be completed, given that it's about proposing that actual link and connection, which is what the developer is providing for here.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to labour this point. But it is quite important, and it always has been very important to this development. And so please, correct me if I'm wrong, so one would leave the new estate, come along the new footpath, and then you've got the church wall all the way round with no footpath. How does that work? Have you got to go through the churchyard?
Yes, so you would continue along the public right-of-way that runs up the slope towards the front of the church and then back down again. That's a public right-of-way, and then it continues onto the pavement that then runs around back towards the main part of the village.
Okay.
In terms of the query about the byway, within the section 106, there's a financial contribution that is being sought for improvements. As far as I understand from my highways colleague, is that would be for surfacing improvements, and it's likely to be a hogging finish, so it wouldn't be tarmac, but it would be quite a substantial surface finish for people to use. It would also be used to deal with a traffic a TRO, which my highways colleague has said it's likely to limit the use of the byway for vehicles at certain times of the day, most likely to be when school children are more likely to be using the byway, so that you've got less chance of that conflict between users. But that's what they're suggesting it possibly could be used for. But the main thing in terms of the byway is that the money is going to be secured to improve the surface of the byway.
I think if you've got a new point to raise, Councillor Beavers, I think Chris has explained how far one can go with the Section 106 and conditions.
Have we answered the question from Mr. and Mrs. Ellis?
So going through them in order, so in terms of how would the proposed footpath be accommodated, I think as set out, it's quite handy having this slide still up there. So the footpath would be accommodated within highways land, so it's not going to be that's beyond the road that's there at the moment, so the road won't actually be getting any narrower. It's actually highway land that then sits outside of the tarmac road as it stands at the moment. In terms of the question about the ecological survey, because that hedge lies within highways land, it's understood that an ecological survey wasn't required. In terms of the part 3, which deals with the byway and the 2 public rights of way, particularly the byway, we do acknowledge that we gave limited weight to the use of that byway at paragraph 11.1.4 because of its nature and the fact that it's unlit, in terms of how sustainable and how much use that byway would have. In terms of part 4, as the agent has already explained, and as our highways colleagues, because they've requested that footpath to be constructed, they would have only have requested something that could actually be constructed. So they've already done their own survey work to ensure that it does all lie within highway land. Otherwise, they wouldn't have requested the condition. So in terms of the trigger in terms of no occupation, I think both parties are fairly confident that pavement can be installed. But ultimately, if it's not installed prior to occupation, then we have the fallback position of having our planning enforcement team who can then carry out checks to ensure that those works are carried out.
Thanks, Councillor Beavers. Councillor Abbott.
Thanks. Yeah, well, it's a brownfield site, and if we're going to build, then obviously these sites should be built on first. I'm a bit envious, actually, all that concrete. We've got a lot of that in Silver End. Been sat there for 20 years, and yet developers keep coming for greenfields around the village. I am very interested in the issue of the path and listen very carefully to what the gentleman said who lives close by. Although I didn't walk it as he suggested, what I did do this afternoon was spend quite a bit of time on Google, where you can virtually walk up and down, and I did that. And that leads to my main concern about this is the loss of the hedges. Now, are we saying that so it's clear the path comes out at the southern edge of the site and then runs down, so that's going to result in quite a lot of hedges. Are we also saying the entire frontage of the site is coming out? Because it looked from that drawing as if that was the case. So that was my first question. Second question is there no assessment for BNG on this site? And if not, could that be explained why, please? And thirdly, we've gone back to the old wording on lighting on condition 30, unfortunately, which doesn't make sense, the first couple of sentences. So, whilst I totally agree about the need to connect the path, otherwise in planning terms it becomes unsustainable. In the report it talks about 70 metres of hedge coming out. Well, I measured it roughly on Google and I thought the distance to the junction of Wethersfield Road was about 100 metres. So could that be clarified, please?
So coming back on your first point about the hedging, the 70 metres referred to within the committee report is the amount along the frontage of the site, so where the vehicular access is going to be. What there isn't in the report is the length of the hedging to accommodate the new path. So if you've measured it earlier and it's 100 metres between where the byway is and the access on Wethersfield Road, that's the length of hedgerow that will need to be either removed or faced back to accommodate the footpath. In terms of BNG, because the application predates when BNG first came in as being mandatory, therefore it's not captured by that. So it does predate that. I think it was 2024, I think. So because the application predates that, BNG isn't coming forward. Was there a third question? I can't remember now.
Yeah, condition 30.
Oh, yeah,
And we've
that's
got
it.
another one tonight as well, where we seem to have gone back to the wording on the lighting condition that with regard to bats, it doesn't really make sense in the first couple of sentences.
Yeah, we can update the wording to that to reflect the most recent version.
So if I may, Madam Chair, just a further question as a result of that. Thank you, that's very helpful and particularly explains the BNG point. Why was there no attempt, or why have we ended up in a situation where yet again an entire frontage is coming out? I mean, we've had this on so many sites. We've just had the entire frontage of the Balls Tie Road Silver End site come out. There is an existing access there. I presume they're going to use that existing access. So if it's a question of visibility display, couldn't we have a condition to keep as much of the... Yeah, so couldn't we have a condition to say keep as much of that hedge as we can within the context of having the visibility display?
Councillor Abbott, perhaps if I can come in on that point. So I think the issue here with this particular site, so obviously you've noted that it's a brownfield site. It's allocated within the plan. Obviously the carriageway here is very narrow, and my understanding, and Mel will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the issue is the visibility display that's required is such that we either accept that the site can be developed, and that if we're creating a new access into the site, that basically means that through that visibility the existing hedgerow needs to be removed. There isn't really, as I understand it, any alternatives here to that. Obviously, where we can, we will look to try to retain existing hedgerow, and it obviously is a large extent, but I don't think there's any alternative here. As I said, Mel will correct me if I'm wrong on that, but yeah, it's either this proposal with a new access with the safe vehicular access onto that carriageway, or the site probably cannot be developed, certainly with access from the actual main road, which means that it would be effectively a landlocked site. I know you won't be happy with that as an answer, but that I'm afraid is, I think, the reality here, that the loss is going to be a consequence of of creating that access and actually producing a highway,
Yeah.
a safe access onto
No,
the highway.
well, thank you for the confirmation, and on that basis, I'll abstain. We are just losing so much habitat, and it's interesting that officers said that county don't require any ecological surveys on hedges that come out on their sites on highway land, and I think that speaks to a lot. So we've got all these strategies about improving nature, and we do get some trees planting on sites, but no one's keeping tabs on the amount of nature we're losing.
Before I pass on to Councillor Shreer, can I just clarify, Chris, the section of hedge that is not the site frontage, so the section of road where the new footway will be created to connect to Weathersfield Road and the existing footway, will hedge be coming out? Because I think the condition says 2 metres where 2 metre width where possible. So is the intention to remove the hedge there or not?
Yeah, so sorry, probably loud enough without it, but so if you look at these two photographs here, so one is at the bottom end of where the new area of footpath would be, and the bottom photograph shows where it would connect to where the byway is, and you can just make out the dairy buildings in the background. It's this piece of land here, so a certain amount of it, as you can see, is grass verge, and so the 2 metres would start from, hopefully you can see my cursor that runs along here, the edge here, so the 2 metres would start there, so inevitably there would be some loss of hedgerow, both, you know, at this top section and then closer to the village. And if I just go to the next slide, which is the sort of central sections of there, the verge is roughly about the same distance. So again, the 2 metres would start from the edge of where the tarmac is and kind of run this way. So there would be some loss of hedge along that stretch to accommodate the new footpath link.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Councillor Shreer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think overall this effectively almost an abandoned site, which has been mentioned, has got a lot of self-growing, so it will be good. And I'm welcome the actual planning and the type of housing that's coming forward to have 30%, noting that there's been no statutory objections to this. And obviously what has become quite important is the focus on the footpath and the byway, and I think that the officer's comments about the byways are good. Just a couple of other points really. I'd just like reassurance with regards to the bins, noting the change in policy going forward that we're having an 1183, that will incorporate and allow the flexibility for all of the bin use going forward for all of our collections in years to come.
Yes, so when I was drafting that section of the committee report, I think the report reflects the fact that it would accommodate the current set of circumstances that we have, and then also what's coming into force, which is more likely to be the bin arrangement by the time the properties are built. If the recommendation is agreed this evening, there is sufficient space for each property to have the larger number of bins that are going to be required from June next year.
Okay, thank you. If I may continue, I agree with sort of the comments that Councillor Beavis was making about that footpath and the fact of joining up to where Essex County Council has that ownership there. And I was just wondering if there's an opportunity here through officers whether we could have an informative so that as those works are being done by the developer, that they are in touch with Essex County Council for highways, so all of that could be repaired and done at the same time so that it causes as least disruption to road users and footway users at the same time, because it would seem very logical to try and tie those works up together. And the other thing is about the actual footpath itself. I think it's really important that we get the maximum width on there for pedestrians and access, because obviously with that volume of houses and encouraging people to walk in and out to the village, although the hedgerow may need to be cut back, I think what's essential here is that actually the visibility and safety of pedestrians trumps the actual hedge. I'm not talking about removal, but actually well cutting it back. We have got an awful lot of examples at the moment in rural villages where vegetation has not been correctly looked after, and it's growing out into the pedestrian space on footways and is causing harm, and it's snagging on clothes. There's a potential danger for eyes. So I think that safety is really important going forward, that there is a good allowance for the necessary width to the installation of that footpath to allow access up and down there by all concerned. So I would be glad to see that going forward, but otherwise I think overall it will be good to see this whole site actually come forward for development as proposed tonight. Thank you.
Can I just ask one further question, Mel? Is there any access from the back of the site where there is a sort of like a turning head into the byway? Because I'm just thinking that if you were a resident in that development and you had children who were going to the secondary school, the quickest route would be down that byway.
Let me just get to the right slide. So it's not the biggest detail here, but if you can see where my cursor is, there's a turning head here, and there is proposed to be a connection at this point here. Informally, having walked this, there is also a walkway that cuts through to the existing residential. Now that residential development, that isn't a formal public right of way, but there is clear evidence to show that it does. That is a way that people connect from that housing estate to the byway, you know, walking in either direction. But in terms of from the actual application site, there is proposed to be an access point at the top there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bevis?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I'm broadly happy to come forward and go with officers' recommendations. Before I do that, I just wanted to make one final comment, and I just wonder whether Melanie could just put up a picture of that long hedge that you're proposing to take out to put the footpath in. And I just wanted to make a point on this, because as someone that's looked at this site now for decades, what I'm really, really confused about is St Peter's Church has no car park. And the users of the church use that whole length from there all the way up to Tanner's to park their cars all the way along there. Where are the people going to park?
Well, I'll try. And in terms of the church users, they're clearly relying on highway land at the moment to park their vehicles, which is not formalised car parking. It would really be down to the church and their users to decide where they want to park and whether it's safe or not. If people continue to choose to park along there once the pavement has been put in, that's at their own risk, or they need to find an alternative option elsewhere within the village.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In response to what Councillor Swire said, looking at that photograph, if that path is going to be 2 metres wide, I would be amazed if that hedge survives. I mean, you can see there's about a metre, if that, of verge, and then you're deep up, hard up against the bottom of the hedge. As for his comments about maintenance, well, I'd love it if Essex County Council did some maintenance on his hedges. You know, he's a member of Essex County Council. Have a word with the cabinet. We've been asking Silver End for maintenance of hedges County Council owns for years near bus stops, and they don't do anything. But on the frontage, I remain intrigued, because could we go back, please, to the plan showing the tree planting? I think they're shown in yellow. Is that right? The new plantings in yellow?
Yes.
So looking to
Yes.
looking to the northwest and to the southeast, if the issue is that visibility display has got to be kept open and therefore the existing hedge has got to be completely destroyed, why are they planting trees all along that frontage right next to the road?
So the indicative planting that's shown on here in that either side of the new vehicular access is shown to be outside of the visibility displays in either direction. As set out within the committee report, a final landscaping scheme is being requested via planning committee, a planning condition, sorry. So to ensure that anything that is planted in there is suitable for being that close to the vehicular access, officers will have an element of control to ensure that the correct species go in that location.
Well, I won't say any more other than I think that hedge, particularly to the northwest, could have been largely kept. It might have been had to have been faced back a bit, but from what I can see on there, it's ripping it out to largely replace it with another row of planting. But I won't say any more on it other than that.
No, just before we move this, absolute clarity on the section of hedge that is from that not along the site frontage. The condition says 2 metres where possible. So is the thing that's what is making it not possible? Is that the hedge, or is it the highway, or
It would be the extent of highway land.
Okay.
Not the hedge, it's the extent of highway land along that side, beyond where the tarmac section of road is.
Thank you. That explains it. Thank you. Right. So, members got any further comments they'd like to make? Councillor Prime.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading through the report, and there's just one thing that sort of come out to me. Sybil Headingham Parish Council put 4 conditions up, and spending the Section 106 money on a bottle bank when, as of next year, all bottled glass will be collected from the curbside. Is that, do we pay much weight to the Parish Council what they require? Because I think somewhere along the line, Section 106 money could be probably spent on something better than a bottle bank. Sorry, John.
To come back on that point, so that's in section 8 of the report on page 18. That request for a bottle bank was made in 2019, so it was significantly before. There was a significant passage of time from. Yeah, so I mean, clearly when they've been consulted more recently, so this year that request hasn't sort of followed through, probably because of the fact that we're going to be changing in the not too distant future in terms of collecting glass from individual properties.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just one point I just wanted to come back on, if I may. Councillor Schweer, you mentioned informative in relation to the footpath. I've just been sort of pondering how that might read. My suggestion in reply to that, so noting obviously the concerns that Councillor Beavis raised about the condition, my suggestion would be that rather than informative to the developer, what we could do as officers is to write to the County Council to highlight the concern over the condition of that section of the footpath, and to suggest that when the works are being done for the connection into that existing footpath, if there is a renewal of that, so one, encourage them to consider some improvement works to that footpath, but that is done concurrently with the works for the other footpath to try to minimise disruption, because I'm not sure, as suggested, that will work, that the ECC will effectively pay, you know, the developer's contractor or whatever. So, but I think the point being highlighted is, from your side, if I've understood correctly, is about minimising disruption. So that would achieve that, and potentially, if it was broadened out to cover the concern that was raised by Councillor Beavis over the condition, we as the planning authority then have highlighted those concerns to the county council, who are the relevant highway authority. Obviously, it's not binding. We could put something in writing to them, but we'd be trying to encourage them to improve the situation, given the new linkage that would be created. So that would be my thought, Councillor Schweer, if you're...
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I mean, I'd be happy to go with that as your suggestion, because I think what's the important thing here is to try and do the whole thing at once. But as you mentioned, to minimise disruption, but also to spur perhaps both discussion between the developer and Essex County Council to get that repaired and back into, you know, safety and usable space for the residents of the village and whoever, especially as it's around the church.
Okay. Would anybody like to move officer's recommendation, Councillor Beavers? And is that with the updated condition 30 on lighting, as suggested by Councillor Abbott?
20 to be delegated.
And condition 20 to be delegated on the subsection
Yeah,
B?
I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Find
thank
a
you.
seconder
Yeah, thank you.
from anybody?
Happy to.
Councillor Holland seconded. All those in favour of granting application? Thank you. Those against? And one abstention. Thank you, members. That application has been approved. Right, members, we'll now come on to our next application this evening, which is item 5B on your agenda. It is application number 25/01534 full, Gershwin Park, land north east of Reed Road, Whittam, and it's to be found on page 55 of your agenda. And we have two speakers on this application. The first speaker is Mr. Will Chambers, who's from the applicant. Thank you.
Good evening and thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to address committee. I'm Will Chambers from Purchase Land and Developments, speaking on behalf of the application team. I'd like to thank officers firstly for the assistance and collaborative nature of the working environment during the application, the PPA and their positive recommendation this evening. This proposal delivers 65 high quality and well designed age restricted retirement homes together with retail units and a 72-bed care home. The scheme is reflective of an identified need, and the design approach enhances the character and appearance of the street scene and complements the surrounding area. There are significant benefits we'd like to bring to your attention in your consideration of the proposal. The retirement phase, delivered by McCarthy and Stone, is 46 apartments, 19 bungalows and the neighbourhood retail, which are all set around communal facilities and landscape grounds, which will provide comfort and security for people to live healthy, happy lives in their own homes within a safe and secure environment. Such accommodation is much needed nationally and locally. Indeed, national planning policy guidance states that it is critical that local authorities deliver housing for older persons, and it is the only type of housing to have its delivery described in such urgent terms. There is clearly a need for this type of accommodation locally, and this development would assist in meeting this need. Whittam's existing stock of care homes comprises mainly first-generation homes built in the 80s and 90s, and when registration design standards were not comparable to today. 50% of these homes were classified by the CQC as requiring improvement in their latest inspection reports, with only 25% of the bedrooms accommodating wet room provision. Our proposals provide all bedrooms with wet room facilities, just as you and I would expect when we are at our most vulnerable when we are older. The best way to increase consumer choice and raise standards across the board is by facilitating this scheme to come forward. The design has been meticulously developed alongside our operator partners to ensure that the building supports excellent standards of care and promotes residents' well-being. The home will provide a full spectrum of care services, including nursing care, general residential care, and specialist dementia care. This level of care provision within a single facility is increasingly rare, as many new homes now are only registered for residential care. Residential nurses will form a core part of the team. This improves outcomes for the residents, but also supports the local health system, reducing pressure on NHS services and enabling continuity of clinical care. Both the retirement and care home occupy a fantastic position within the wider Maltings Lane development, located opposite the Pottery Kiln Public House, where some of the more mobile residents will no doubt venture with their friends and family, and also within the very close proximity of both Gershwin Park Nursery and Chipping Hill Primary School. The operators of the schemes will seek to embed themselves within the community and positively encourage interaction between their residents and the schools, with events hosted jointly throughout the year, especially around Christmas and Easter time.
Do carry on for a little bit
Can I
longer.
finish on? I've just
Yes.
got yes, thank you. I would also add that a substantial benefit of the proposed scheme will be up to 70 full-time employee staff members just in the care home alone, many of whom will be employed from the local area and will no doubt spend their hard-earned earnings in Witham High Street and within the surrounding businesses. Therefore, I would respectfully request that members follow the recommendation of officers for this well-designed scheme which provides significant housing, social and economic benefits.
Thank you. We now have another speaker on this application, who's Mrs. Hannah Pearce, also representing the applicant.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm Hannah Pearce from Gillings Planning, acting as planning agent for the applicants. So the principle of development on this site for these uses is accepted by officers where it comprises sustainable development in both the local and national policy context, is within the development boundary of Witham and supported by adopted planning policies. The proposed development of this site is of course long established in its planning history and it accords in general terms with the approved, albeit dated, master plan. It is in a sustainable location with good access to services, facilities and transport links. There's no outstanding technical matters as confirmed by your officers, including highways, and the applicant is willing to accept the proposed conditions. The Section 106 will of course deal with contributions towards infrastructure, including an off-site contribution towards affordable housing, which has been discussed and agreed at length. The also agrees to pay contributions towards mitigation of recreational pressures on local designated sites, as well as payments towards libraries, recreation facilities and the NHS. There's no other material considerations that suggest any harm outweigh the benefits. And those benefits are substantial and as follows. Provision of specialist accommodation to contribute to meeting an identified need, which includes the delivery of a care home as well as the retirement village, providing much needed purpose-built accommodation for the older people of Witham. These proposals will contribute to the supply of housing in the district with the equivalent of 103 new homes in total and off-site contributions making for the provision of new affordable homes. It will also lead to the release of predominantly family housing across the borough, freeing up larger and under-occupied family homes. Improvements to health services with new residents statistically likely to have fewer visits to local health professionals. And statistics from McCarthy and Stone show that those living in such developments are at less risk of trips and falls with better recovery from illness and injury. The development overall will create a community that offers increased well-being, safety, security and companionship is offered, reducing anxiety, loneliness and isolation and maintaining good health and well-being generally. The site is in a sustainable and accessible location and will make efficient use of an underutilised site that's been earmarked for development for some time, being one of the last parcels of the Malting Lanes development. The site is well located with easy links to the town centre and beyond, will benefit from further from on-site neighbourhood retail units. The provision of open space in the northernmost part of the site will be accessible to the wider public, and the new buildings will be energy efficient, using a fabric-first approach that will achieve high efficiency in terms of both construction and living. There is significant landscaping enhancement more generally, including the planting of over 200 new trees, and the proposals offer biodiversity and ecological enhancement with a 17.61% biodiversity net gain on site. The long-awaited provision of neighbourhood shops to serve the local community within walking distance will be much welcomed, will contribute to an inclusive and self-sufficient neighbourhood. The proposal provides support for local facilities and services, residents shopping locally and using those. There will be investment locally, and it is estimated that during the construction and operation of the proposal, there will be an anticipated GVA of over 13 million over the lifetime. There will also be revenue for... Sorry, am I okay just to... quickly. The revenue for the council and jobs will be created, and I think it's already been mentioned in terms of the additional job creation. Retirement housing in general generates greater local spend than other developments, with an average of over £500,000 spending per year, approximately half of which spent on the local high street, assisting local shops and businesses. I think, as I would just carry on and say, as Will did, that we hope you can support the proposals and respectfully request that you follow the recommendation of officers where Perseus and McCarthy Stone are geared up, ready to go and deliver the proposal in the short term. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Right, now hand over to Janine, who's going to give us her presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Planning permission is sought to erect 264 square metres of neighbourhood retail units Class E, a 72-bed care home Class C2, and 65 residential retirement dwellings and apartments Class C3, alongside access, parking, landscaping and other associated works. Just before I start my presentation formally, at paragraphs 7.2 to 7.5, under the planning history of the committee report, there is an error in respect of the reasons for refusal stated on the previous application. It refers to a site in Cressing as opposed to the one before you in Whittam. That's why I've circulated the hard copies of the reasons for refusal from the 21 application, just to clarify that point. Please note the formal assessment under paragraphs 11.28 to 11.214 is factually correct in respect of the appeal decision and the previous reasons for refusal in comparison to this scheme before you. The principle of a care home, retail and housing in this location has been previously considered acceptable by the inspector. However, it was just obviously the design details which obviously will come on to this revised scheme. Okay, the site is located in the boundary of Whittam within the development boundary. The surrounding area includes a primary school, residential development, public open space, the oldest supermarket, a public house and restaurant down here, a nursery and offices, and to northeast of the site is a community facility being built and owned by Brentford District Council, currently under construction. The site is subject to an outline planning permission and an approved master plan, which was to provide a mixed-use development, and the land uses on the approved master plan for this application site included residential development, public open space, neighbourhood food store and local neighbourhood centre with associated retail units. The principle of developing the site for a mixed-use development before you, including a care home, residential use and retail for a local neighbourhood centre, is considered acceptable in accordance with the adopted local plan. As shown on the slide, there are three distinct areas. So this block would include the retail to the ground floor fronting the street, and then you would have the apartments above and behind. This block, if you can see my cursor, sorry, is the care home with the parking access from Owers Road. And obviously these are the bungalows as part of the retirement village. The southwest boundary is clearly defined by the care home and the retail units, and there's a large open green space to the rear of this and in the centre of the site. The site boundaries are well tree lined to enhance the streetscape. This was a key issue of the previously refused scheme, whereby the inspector considered the extent of the tree planting on the refused scheme was lacking. This proposal seeks to ensure that the new streets are tree lined as an important contribution towards character and quality of the urban environment. In respect of impact on neighbouring residential properties, given the siting of the development, the nearest properties are where my cursor is shown here, and it's not considered that the development would result in material harm to the existing amenities of occupiers. Environmental health officers have raised no objections to the potential air quality, whereby the impacts of the proposed development on vehicle emissions are negligible compared to the extant consent, and construction impacts on air quality, dust and other pollutants can be secured by condition. Therefore, no objections have been raised. In addition, fume extraction ventilation equipment associated with the commercial premises is to be secured by condition. Again, no objections have been raised to environmental health officers. And in addition, with respect to noise and increased activity, conditions are in place to secure commercial plant equipment. Delivery hours for the care home, as set out in condition 33, are between 7 a.m. to 9 p.m, Monday to Saturday, to ensure deliveries are available for the patrons of the care home. The retail deliveries and servicing would be restricted to the hours of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m, Monday to Saturday, at no time on Sundays or bank holidays. Any construction activity is to be conditioned to ensure a comprehensive construction management plan is submitted to the authority for consideration. The proposed external lighting scheme ensures the objectives of intrusive light shall be met in accordance with the lighting assessment, and a wildlife sensitive lighting design scheme is going to be secured by condition. In addition, the removal of permitted development rights to the bungalows protects any residential occupiers surrounding the site from any alterations that potential future occupiers may want to do. Also, permitted development rights will be restricted in terms of the retail units to ensure that they comply with the local centre that we seek to provide in this location. In respect of highways, no objections have been raised to the access roads, changes to the highway to facilitate the footway cycleway or the overall development. The public realm improvements to the frontage along the retail units is welcomed, and the proposed parking provision, taking into account the location of the site within the urban area and the TRICS assessment, is acceptable. The trip generation for this development would be significantly less in terms of traffic demand when compared to the extant permission, and the overall local road network has the capacity to accommodate the new development, with no objections from National Highways or Essex Highways. In respect of flood risk, no objections have been raised by the lead local flood authority, and to conclude, the layout of the site is clearly legible, providing a clear delineation between the retail units with the apartments above, care home, bungalows, together with the parking and landscaped areas within the plot. In terms of the proposed, sorry, I've gone ahead of myself. This is the site plan for the retail and apartment block. As you can see, the retail units, as I said earlier, are at the ground floor, and then obviously you'll have the apartments above and obviously to the rear. It's an L-shaped building with 4 stories in height, stepping down to 3 stories at the rear. The proposed retail units would provide an active frontage to the street with a landscape pedestrian boulevard with tree planting. The entrance to the retail car park is secondary to the pedestrian footpath, and trees and planting along this boundary can provide a continuous green buffer. The frontage of the retail units would include a planting and seating design, providing an area of new public realm areas to serve local residents to be secured by condition. The L-shaped building enables landscaping to the east and to the west of the building, providing residents with landscape gardens. The shared residence gardens located to the north of the retail car park benefits facing south and is mirrored in the neighbouring care home to create one large green space. The proposed car parking serving the residents is deemed acceptable and has been broken up with landscaping between the parking spaces and also generous planting to the boundaries. This is a CGI perspective of the front elevation of the retail units showing the apartments above. The overall massing is not too dissimilar to other buildings within the locality, most notably the existing apartment blocks around Maltings Lane development and the Mercedes building to the south. The flat roof design of the building includes various heights stepping down from 4 stories to 3 stories, breaks up the overall massing and reducing the overall appearance. The 4-storey element over the apartments runs partway along the west elevation, then steps down, and the canopy frames the residential entrance, which I'll show you now, and a combination of Juliet and framed walk-on balconies helps to provide further interest. This is a visual looking west, so obviously you can see the massing and scale on this slide with the elevational detailing, including the various materials to be used, the openings providing an active frontage, and the main retail frontage includes brick panels framed in protruding arches, and the glazed elements to the retail unit adds further contrast to this elevation to give a separation from the accommodation above. The elevations are broken up by varying brick patterns and colours, and alternate colour bricks are used to articulate the longer elevations. The overall elevational design of the building has sought to reference the character buildings within Whittam Centre, utilising a modern interpretation of some of their materials, feature and details. This is a northwest elevation, so as you can see, obviously it's 4-storey when it's fronting the road, but then it steps down, and obviously it shows the main entrance to the apartments. This is the eastern elevation, and this shows the landscaping area serving future occupiers of the retirement apartments, with significant landscaping and seating to be created, which will be controlled by condition. It should be noted that all the apartments would provide sufficient internal space for future occupiers, and each flat would have sufficient outlook and daylight. And in respect of amenity space, the ground floor flats would benefit from private garden areas, and Juliet balconies are provided to a number of the upper floors, together with the communal garden area, which is policy compliant. In terms of the street scene elevations, street scene A, obviously this just illustrates the massing of the retail and apartment block, and taking into account the care home. And then section elevation, street scene B, would show the care home and how it steps down to single story where my cursor is for the entrance, and then obviously the bungalows, which I'll come on to. So in terms of the proposed layout for the care home, this proposal demonstrates how it's been set back significantly from the road frontages and has enabled landscaping gardens to the south with pedestrian footpaths and significant tree planting along the street. The design also incorporates ground floor bedrooms benefiting from private courtyards, and to the east of the building, the car parking is broken up with landscaping including hedgerows and trees, and to the immediate north of the building is a communal garden area. In terms of the elevations, obviously you've got the south elevation here and east elevation. It's a contemporary flat roof building with varying heights, including 4-storey, then stepping down to single-storey to transition between the care home and the single-storey bungalows off Owers Road. And the elevations have been carefully considered to reduce the overall visual impact and keep the height as low as possible. The elevations are broken up with extruded bays, and these bays also stand taller, as you can see on the screen, than the main roof line, breaking up what would be quite a long continuous line. The top floor has been stepped back from the main elevation line, reducing the overall impact, and the materials would include buff brick, bronze cladding and light timber to the elevations. And the cafe and entrance, where my cursor is, would incorporate a vast expanse of glass, make up to the external walls with an external overhang. These are the north elevation and the west elevation. And as I said, obviously the applicant has sought on this revised scheme to ensure active frontages are to all elevations broken up via the openings and different materials. And officers consider that the overall massing, height, siting of the building to the boundaries and elevational design is acceptable and would contribute to enhancing the character and appearance of the area. In respect to the bungalows, obviously the access would be off Owers Road, and obviously this is a care home here. They're located to the northeast of the plot. The overall design and layout has significantly changed from the previously refused application. Obviously these are all single storey now, and the proposed layout has omitted parking courts, which were raised as a concern during the appeal. They are considered to incorporate well tree-lined streets, well-spaced low-level bungalows positioned around an access road to provide like a cul-de-sac design, and a road separates the bungalows from the care home. The bungalows are positioned to transition in scale and provide a street frontage to the care home, and the overall layout ensures landscaping is integral to the overall design through the use of trees to the car parking and hedgerows. And the east and north site boundary benefits from tree-lined streetscaping of the surrounding area, creating a design which is cohesive to the surrounding area. These are just some of the elevations. So obviously you've got a simple gable design, but with the detailing of the openings and the overhang. And it would include red brick render and also a mix of clay and slate tiles. Again, these are just some elevations of the bungalows and the street scene here as well. In terms of landscaping proposals, landscaping have reviewed the proposal, raising no objections. However, subject to conditions, further details on the specific species in respect to planting, including trees, shrubs, flowers, including numbers, overall maintenance are to be secured by condition. Overall, officers consider the proposed landscaping scheme demonstrates that the development would benefit from tree-lined streets and a well-thought-out amenity spaces, together with the use of landscaping to reduce the extent of hard standing, providing green buffers and defensible boundaries. In respect of ecology, the site is not subject to any statutory or non-statutory designations, and no objections have been raised by the council's ecologists, and that applies also to the biodiversity net gain. No objections have been raised subject to conditions. In terms of the next few slides, these are just some photos. So obviously the view from Drury Road looking west, view to the north of the site, the Aldi food store, obviously the access to serve the flats, northeast of the site, this is east of the site, so that's Persimmon offices, and obviously you've got the nursery just a little bit further around. This would be the vehicle access to the care home and bungalows off Owers Road, and obviously this is the primary school and existing residential properties. And this is just looking across the site. Obviously, you can just just get the frame of the community centre that's obviously being built. In terms of updates, please note there is an update to condition 2. In accordance with Essex County Council highway comments, the following drawings on this slide should be read in conjunction with the drawings listed on 120 and 121 of the committee report. With respect to a further update to the heads of terms, as set out, this should again be read in conjunction with section 15 of the report. Just to clarify, the open space and amenity space, there will be a financial contribution as set out in the main report, but this just confirms the provision of how it will be managed on site, and if the land got transferred to Whittam Town Council, or if they did not wish to accept it, then it would be transferred to a management company. So obviously this will need to go into the section 106. In addition, there would be a monitoring fee for significant on-site BNG provision. And finally, Braintree District Council and Essex County Council monitoring fees. The amounts are to be confirmed following the drafting of the agreement. To summarise, the principle of development is acceptable. The development, by reason of its scale, massing, elevation or design, is compatible with the surrounding area. The development provides sufficient access and parking availability on site with the encouragement of sustainable modes of transport. Environmental impacts such as external lighting, noise, fumes and disturbance are acceptable, and the proposal would include a significant landscaping plan to be secured by condition, enhancing the overall townscape, and no objections, as I said, have been raised on ecological grounds. A number of sustainable measures are employed across the whole site, and flood risk is deemed acceptable. The council have secured affordable housing provision, in payment in lieu, health provision, travel monitoring fee, a library's contribution, open space and amenity contributions together with the management, and RAMS payments for each dwelling. Officers consider the development benefits of the proposal are clear, complying with policy. And in terms of the recommendation, subject to the update of condition 2 and obviously the heads of terms, officers are recommending to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, for taking us through that quite a detailed application. Members, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, thank you to officers for responding to my email this afternoon, where I was halfway through the report and I started reading about Cressing, so I thought I'd better flag that I didn't think there was a connection. So thanks for dealing with that. Yes, well, this site, I'm old enough to remember when this was the Field of Dreams. I can remember the newspaper article, late 1980s, I think. Here we are, we're still building on it, but hey-ho, we'll get there in the end. I'm going to support this. I think it's a better version than the last. I think it is particularly good to see that the applicants have responded to the issues around landscaping. There is a good quantum of planting. The only thing I'd say, which I know other members share, is let's just hope the trees reach the heights and scale shown, given the difficulty in getting young trees started. There was a couple of things I just wanted to flag, and one of them is there's no on-site affordable, as I understand it. That's going to be off-site, and there's a sum of 1.3 million set aside for that. That's the only sort of housing issue I have with the site. Otherwise, I think obviously there's a need for care homes, and the bungalows is very good. Having bungalows for people who need them is really important. We often say that, don't we, on sites. There's very few bungalows. Well, here we've got a whole load of them, so that's a really good thing. And it delivers the shops, which have been long talked about. So there's a lot of good things. I think from an overall design perspective, I do like the way the two garden areas back onto one another. That's going to create a substantial green space. I hope the applicants do deliver on those raised planters. I think people who are still active and able to would love to be able to grow some vegetables in those raised planters. So there's a lot to like. I thought the comments about the connection to the town centre were a bit tenuous. I doubt that many people will walk from here to the town centre. I mean, good luck if they do. But I think it then raises the issue I raised last night at full council about we don't want parking restrictions in the town centre. There's a limited number of free spaces, which are ideal for people who might want to pop into the town to visit the one bank we've got left or some of the shops we've got left. So I think that's linked. The two issues I wanted to raise as sort of serious queries is, again, that lighting conditions crept in, the wording for the first two sentences. And I don't think the officer mentioned the fact that Anglian Water have got an in-principle objection to this development. Now, I'm worried about that on two grounds. One, are we then able to grant this in the light of the fact we've got a statutory consultee saying they object? And I understand officers went back to them and they still objected. And the second question is, looking at the local plan and any other developments we have coming forward before we adopt the new local plan, how do we stand now if the main sewage treatment plant is saying they don't have capacity and that adding any further development will cause environmental and pollution issues? It does make me very worried, because there's over the other side of the road there's a site for another 400 houses is in the local plan. There's lots of other developments going on in the area. Are we now in a situation where, until that issue is dealt with, we have a planning problem? Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the external lighting, yeah, obviously we can update that condition. That's no problem, to reflect obviously the wording. In respect to Anglian Water, obviously, yes, we are aware that they have objected, but obviously some consideration has to be given to the appeal scheme, that there was no objections raised. And in addition, obviously the MPPF, I think it's paragraph 194, states decisions and policies should be on in terms of the acceptable use of the land, rather than separate regimes that are obviously operated by pollution control authorities. We are aware of their objection, and they're a non-statutory consultee, and obviously the applicant would have to engage with them if you deem the application to be acceptable this evening. I don't know if Chris wants to add anything, or is that... Yeah. Sorry.
That's right. So Councillor Abbott, just to add to those comments that Janine's just said, so there is a clear reference within the MPPF which deals with this point, which is in terms of sort of decision making. It does specifically say that planning decisions should assume that these regimes will operate effectively. So that is pollution control regimes outside of the planning system. So I think the wider point is that this may well be an issue that we see more and more as the planning authority, and this being raised with us. I don't feel that we, on planning grounds, have reasons where it would change our recommendation on the application as officers, because ultimately the undertaker would have to provide for that development if planning permission is granted. So I don't dispute the issue. But in terms of our decision making, we've got a clear steer, I think, from the MPPF in terms of how the local planning authority should respond to issues such as this. But there is a wider point here, and I think particularly in this area of the district, I think we probably will see future consultation responses that raise concerns in this regard. It's something that, as the officer team, we will continue to try to liaise with the consultee on the matter, but as I said, I'm not sure in terms of our recommendation, certainly not in relation to this application this evening, would we be proposing to change the recommendation in light of the concerns that have been raised by Anglian Water. But as I said, the key point for me is the steer that she's provided within the MPPF on this point.
Thank you for that clarification. So yes, I didn't pick up on that point. They are non-statutory. I thought they were statutory. Just on the technical point then, is there a difference between how we apply an Anglian Water objection at development control level to how we would apply it at local plan formulation level?
So it's a good question, Councillor Abbott. I think that probably is one for policy colleagues just to confirm, but I know through the various work that's been done on the evidence base for the new local plan, there are various studies, and I understand one of those is in relation to water capacity, so and such forth. So I would assume, I haven't read that particular evidence base that's been prepared, but I'm assuming that's a matter that's been considered as part of that process. But I think, irrespective of policy versus development management, I think we are probably in a situation where that existing infrastructure is probably being tested, and it is a matter that simply needs to obviously be resolved for all concerned. How that gets resolved is probably outside of our ability as the planning authority, I would suggest, based on the governance steer within the NPPF. But it is, I'm not trying to dilute the actual issue that's being raised. So, no pun intended, but yeah. Thank you.
Can I just come back on a point in respect to the lighting? What we'll do is we've actually got 2 conditions for lighting, so number 24 and 20. So we'll omit condition 24, and then condition 20 captures everything that we need to in terms of the wording. So yeah, so I'll put that as part of the recommendation as well, to omit condition 24, and we'll amend condition 20. Yeah.
So that's to omit condition 24 and to amend condition 20. Yeah, okay, thanks. Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. If I remember rightly, and I may have got this wrong, the first application, the original one, did come to committee, didn't it? And we refused it. And if I've got this right, I think the design, collectively as a committee, I think the design we felt was truly awful on the care home. I seem to remember that somebody used the expression looking more like a prison block, which it did. So what we have before us this evening bears no comparison, because this is vastly better, way better. And I think the applicants congratulated and have worked hard with officers to bring forward what we have this evening. And actually, it looks, to me, it looks quite good. I would agree with the speaker, I think it was the agent who spoke first, and also with Councillor Abbott, that there is a need for retirement housing and care home facilities in the district. We have both at the moment, and yes, I think they are a bit tired looking. That's no reflection, by the way, on how they're being run. I'm referring to their design and layout, because they are sort of 30, 40 years old. So this is a very welcome upgrade to that provision. Also, good to hear that the hopefully the majority of care home staff will be local, and so it's going to provide some good local employment. And there are some excellent Section 106 benefits coming with this. Over £1 million towards affordable housing, which is, you know, for I think fairly obvious reasons, isn't going to be on site, but can be elsewhere in the district. Some good open space provision. The NHS, and I think if I've read it right, money towards a library service, which is not something we always get. So I think that's to be welcomed, and ecological mitigation. So I think there is an awful lot to like about this, and it will be very good to see this coming forward on this site. So again, I say well done to the applicants for getting their act together and working with officers to bring forward something that hopefully, you know, we can approve this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry. I spoke to a few residents in Witham about this over the last week, and actually I've got numbers here. I spoke to 176 residents, and 152 of them said that this isn't for the residents of Witham. One lady I spoke to says she works at Avery Healthcare in Braintree Mews, just over the way, said that all the residents there aren't from Braintree District. So although we claim we need, and we do, we need these facilities, we need them for our residents. I mean, I am in full support of this, but on the grounds of the residents I've spoke to, I will be abstaining.
Yeah, sorry, we can't restrict it, obviously, to the local area. That's all I can say, sorry.
Councillor Beavers, I think you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I won't reiterate the words of Councillor Gabrielle Spray, but yeah, I think it's more aesthetically pleasing when I kind of was looking at the visuals actually and pulling it apart a bit and remembering what we did see and what we see now. So again, just congratulating the developers on that. I just wanted to ask on condition 40 on the age restriction. Whose condition is that? It's not a district council condition, is it? I'm just a bit confused. And who polices it? If it is our condition and not, is it McCarthy and Stone? Whose is it?
Yeah, it is the McCarthy and Stone requirement to actually live there. So that's why we've conditioned that.
And who polices the age? How does that work? I have a real thing about ID, you see, and I'm like, how does that actually work?
So there's two elements to it. So McCarthy and Stone is the operator. That's how they choose to operate their model. So that's a condition of sale or lease, or however they let the properties. It's a planning condition which is enforceable by the district council, because if there wasn't a planning condition there, then if McCarthy and Stone didn't build the development, somebody else did, and they didn't have an age restriction on there, then potentially people could be living there with, for example, school-aged children. So it's partly to protect the county council in terms of the provision that they make for education, so it's a standard thing. But in terms of the enforceability of the condition, it will be down to the district council to enforce. Yeah.
That's true, wasn't it? Councillor
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I won't go over the points that various colleagues have made about the good design and its situation and landscaping, and also the benefit of the BNG and with the tree-lined streets. A lot to like about this application, giving huge benefits that have been mentioned over time, especially bungalows, adaptable, flexible buildings that are going to be very useful for residents in future years. Just one point, a couple of points that I'd really like to make is one, I'm just a little bit concerned about Anglian Water making these comments, because I think utility companies need to start giving more consideration to the amount of building growth and construction that is going to go on across this part of Essex, if not Essex itself, especially with government targets and the increase in housing. This is going to become of an increasing concern, because if this is at this level already locally, what is it going to be on various other sections across? So one, I think that planning, we could actually feed this back to utility companies, because our strategy in the longer term is going to be very much affected by this with our policies as well. And I think we need to adapt this with going forward with developments for those utility companies. Also, I think we need to talk about water scarcity, and when developments are in place or building them, that we actually need to make measures to reduce water usage, because at the moment it's far too high. We all know it's going to get a lot more expensive, so I think there's a lot of work to do there. My other point is with regard to sort of the trade section, the commercial section there, because it's all been very well designed, and I won't ask the bin question about the residents and houses this time, because I understand the flexibility there. But I just wondered, is there landscaping in a place for the trade waste, because you've got that commercial unit there, and I'm just thinking of the close proximity to other residents, that was all.
Yeah, there will be a landscaping buffer around the refuse storage for the commercial premises, which is just to where the retail parking is. Do you want me to go?
That's where I thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just go back to the picture.
I think it was on
I'll
the
just
list.
show it. Yeah. So it's here. If you can see my cursor, or if you want me to go back on a. Yeah, here. So obviously you've still got landscaping.
Yeah, I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Right, Julian, can I just ask a question too, just about the parking provision for the care home? Are you satisfied? Because obviously there'll be visitors and staff, and that's adequate, is it? Sorry, I've probably mentioned the port, but I can't remember where.
Yeah, so obviously the staffing members would be on like a shift rota. So we've assessed the transport statement, and in terms of occupancy of the parking available, it wouldn't be fully used at one time, so there would always be parking provision based on the nature of the part-time staff and the shift patterns of the full-time staff there. So there is sufficient parking, and that's also was supported by the inspector, whereby given it's an urban location, there is flexibility in terms of parking provision, but the care home is acceptable together with the retail and the residential.
And also for the visitors?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, nobody got any further questions. Anybody like to move officer's recommendation with the changes to the lighting condition 2 and the section 106, Councillor Spray?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to move officer's recommendation for approval with the conditions.
And the updated drawing list?
Yes.
Can I have a second, please? Councillor Diamond, thank you. All those in favour of granting this with those changes? That's those against, and what abstentions? One abstention. Okay, that has been granted. Thanks, members. Right, we'll now move on to our third application this evening. This is item 5C on your agenda. This is application number 25/02114 Falls. This is Kelvedon Park, London Road, Rivenhall End. And that is to be found on page 142 of your agenda. And I believe we do have, am I right thinking, we do have a speaker on this application? Yes, Mr. Edwards. Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Good evening, everyone. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening. My name's Carl Edwards. I'm the Director for all things digital and infrastructure for Essex County Fire and Rescue Service, based myself predominantly at Kelvedon Park. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Planning Officer for their assistance and proactivity with our application. This has really culminated in a positive recommendation before you this evening. The proposal presents an exciting opportunity for Essex County Fire and Rescue Service in terms of building and creating a new state-of-the-art training facility. This is going to be a facility that provides modern-day firefighting techniques, which replaces our existing site at the Wethersfield facility where it currently is today. It's a really important new facility, critical to train our firefighters. It's been designed to deliver training outcomes that meet a number of national operational guidelines that are set through a whole range of different incidences, and it's a significant benefit in terms of making sure that our firefighters are trained to the highest standards to keep the residents of Essex safe. In addition to the live fire building itself, there will be an ancillary facility that includes a range of different functions. These include some workshop rooms, some lab teaching space, some classrooms, a drill tower for pitching ladders and working at heights, a road traffic collision and heavy rescue training area, which is essential to not obviously to ensure that we can respond to road traffic collisions effectively. And it creates really a centre of excellence because it's right at the heart of Essex in terms of where our headquarters is based, and will allow us to really be a centre of excellence going forward. The land at Kelvedon Park is already allocated within the adopted local plan for uses associated with Essex Fire Service, and the principal development therefore has been deemed acceptable, and in this regard the scheme is fully compliant with all of the policy requirements. It's noted that there are no outstanding objections to the application raised by statutory consultees, including Essex Highways and Environmental Health. And it's been identified that the proposal will bring a lot of economic and social benefits as well as improvements to the safety of the general public. The proposed development is quite a significant investment, which will really reinforce Kelvedon Park site overall, and for the headquarters itself of Essex Fire and Rescue. And for that reason, we generally hope that you will be able to support the proposal tonight and the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edwards. Sure. I think actually we've all had seen the agenda, so I think I will now actually ask Janine if she could continue with the presentation.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the application is for full planning permission to erect a new live fire training facility comprising of the erection of a 4-storey live fire training tower with associated plant, single-storey ancillary building, an appliance storage building, single-storey classroom, 5-storey drill tower, road traffic collision and heavy rescue training areas, equipment storage, electrical substation, vehicle parking, attenuation pond, along with hard and soft landscaping. The site is located to the south of the A12 dual carriageway between Kelvedon and Rivenhall End and is separated from either settlement. The site is located in a parkland setting and has fields all around the site. There are a few residential properties to the northeast of the site, and the River Blackwater runs to the southeast of the site. Whilst the site is located within the countryside, policy LPP4 of the adopted local plan states that land at the Essex and Fire Service headquarters at Kelvedon Park is allocated as a special employment area. The application proposes a new live fire training facility and is for the applicant's very special training needs, which are recognised as being essential to the maintenance of an effective emergency services. The applicant has confirmed, due to the lease agreement change at Wethersfield Training Centre, the Essex County Fire and Rescue Service is looking to develop and replace the live training facility in this location at Kelvedon Park. In terms of the existing site plan, obviously this is the access into the site, and at the moment it's occupied by a building, obviously parkland and hard standing. To the front, obviously this is the original building that was on site, and obviously it's been significantly extended with training facilities previously. The site is within a flood risk zone 1, so therefore there's no increase of flood risk, but obviously it is adjacent to flood zones 2 and 3 given the proximity to River Blackwater, and there are no known designated heritage assets on site. In respect to the proposed site plan, the development would be located to the south-east of the existing buildings, and it's along this boundary. So obviously I'll go through the elevations. Obviously this would be the parking area, this would be the ancillary building, the drill tower, if you can see my cursor, and obviously this would be the live fire facility, and obviously this would be the heavy rescue collisions, which would be marked out. The applicant has sought to provide additional landscaping around the site, including an attenuation pond, which is welcome to help mitigate against the overall industrial nature of the proposed development. In terms of footpaths, this slide highlights the existing footpaths on the left. So during the course of the application, the footpath number 35, which is here, which ran alongside the existing training facilities, which was part of the requirement of the 2012 application to extend the facilities at the site, has been extinguished, and now obviously footpath 35 runs through the site, as you can see where my cursor is here. Essex County Council, as I said, recently granted permission for the extinguishment of this footpath in October, and now obviously it runs directly through the site. However, during the course of the application, the applicant has engaged with Essex County Council to seek a temporary diversion of footpath 35, which would go around the perimeter of the site, and then subject to this application being granted, there would be a pre-commencement condition to ensure the full diversion of that footpath 35. In addition to that, we would, following engagement with Essex County Council, the Rivenhall footpath here in the dotted line, Essex County Council obviously have advised for the safety of pedestrians that this could also be rediverted, which I'll hopefully get a bigger slide in a minute, but it would go along where you can see this footpath here, which would join out. But as I said, obviously following discussions with Essex County Council, in principle, they haven't raised any objections subject to appropriate conditions. The next slide is the elevations of the ancillary building. It's quite a simple structure, but obviously develops through the various openings, the brickwork, the cladding, and obviously to the south elevation, you've got this copper canopy adding interest. The building would reflect the character of the existing buildings on site, responding to the heights, and has obviously been designed in that manner to reflect the existing training facilities there. From an elevational design, the considerable massing and scale, it's sufficiently managed through the detailing materials. This would be the live fire facility. The building has been designed obviously for functionality, for the emergency training purposes. The design incorporates a graduated colour from dark blue to light blue to try and integrate with the sky and visually soften the overall scale and size of the building. The scale of the building would be higher than existing buildings on site, but obviously given the nature for the emergency services training facilities, it is deemed acceptable in line with policy LPP4 of the adopted local plan. Obviously similar in nature is the drill tower, which again obviously has been graduated in colour to try and integrate and would incorporate metal cladding to all elevations, and obviously projecting beams and obviously pitch roofs obviously for the ladder skills that are required. Again, obviously we deem it acceptable in accordance with policy LPP4. This slide obviously shows the layout, but this would be the training area for heavy rescue training. And it would obviously operate in a kind of typical road traffic and incident with obviously denoting the markings on the hard standing. Obviously, there is a large expanse of hard standing proposed given the nature of the scheme, but the applicant has sought to provide additional landscaping around the site. And the landscaping officers have raised no objections following additional revisions during the course of the application. However, to ensure that we get the correct species and numbers for this site, we will be seeking to secure this by condition. In terms of the site elevations, obviously this just shows in relation to the existing offices building on the right where you can see my cursor. Obviously this would be the ancillary building, the drill tower and live fire facility. Obviously this is the site at the moment. The next few photographs will show that. So obviously this is the car parking area that's there at the moment with a single storey outbuilding. Again, obviously a view of the buildings on site at the moment. These are the existing offices buildings, and these are the footpaths. Obviously, so you've got Rivenhall 36, Kelvedon 28, and Kelvedon 35. As I said, all would be subject to a pre-commencement condition in respect of the relevant diversions. To conclude, the application site is located within Kelvedon Park, which is allocated as a special employment site to support the emergency facilities with particular reference to training facilities. The application seeks full planning permission for the associated new live fire training facility. The proposed buildings, whilst of considerable size, height and footprint, would be in line with obviously the emergency services requirements, and the development is to be mitigated by a comprehensive landscaping scheme, which, as I said, is to be secured by condition. And it's therefore considered that the scale, design and character of the development is deemed acceptable. The development would provide sufficient access and parking availability within the site, including provision of electrical vehicle charging spaces and cycle parking. Obviously, it is quite restricted given the location on the A12, but obviously the applicants sought to do any improvements that they can. In respect of the environmental impacts, obviously external lighting, noise, fumes and disturbance are all considered acceptable by the environmental health officer. Landscaping, as I said, is not objected to, neither is the proposal on ecological grounds. The development, in particular reference to the ancillary building, would be BREEAM very good. Drainage and flood risk information submitted has been reviewed by Anglian Water, the Environment Agency and the lead local flood authority with no objections. And whilst the proposal would result in encroachment on footpath 35 Rivenhole, as I said, a condition can be secured to ensure that that is diverted prior to the commencement of any development, together with the redirection of footpath 36. To conclude, it is recommended that the application is granted in accordance with the approved plans and documents, subject to the conditions and reasons set out in Appendix 1 of the committee report for this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Members. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, we've sort of known locally this was coming, because I remember going to a consultation event about it, must have been over 10 years ago. And obviously the land was set aside also in the local plan for expansion for this. So obviously conversations have been had, and also I understand the Wethersfield site not being available anymore. And in planning terms, I suppose you could say it's a bit of a one-off. You know, we don't often get applications for fire training facilities in every town and village, obviously. So I think we have to look at it in those light. But on the other hand, also it is in a rural area, and so although it's close to the A12, it backs onto the Blackwater Valley. So I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. In terms of access, I mean, it isn't very sustainable. You can try and cycle along the cycleway along the A12. I've done it, but it's not a very pleasant environment. The bus services are pretty limited, so the inevitability is that most people going here are going to go by car. But I did notice in the report it talks about car sharing when that happens, so that's a good thing. Just to say as well, also, although I'm a member of Rivenhall Parish Council, for one reason or another, this never came before Rivenhall Parish Council, so and that's why it says no comment in the. I don't know why, but it was never even considered by the Parish Council. But I did agree with the representation that was made about the public rights of way, but I think they've been very well covered off. I do like the arrangement there, the way it sort of wraps it. They haven't tried to shove them all off site, so people will have an interesting view of walking along the countryside and then the fire training facility and then out again. So in principle, I support this. Obviously, we do need fire training facilities. The fire service do a fantastic job. And obviously their staff need to be trained for all eventualities. My two concerns are, the officer said the landscaping is still reserved to condition. I think it's really important that we get as much screen as we can on
Thank you. Just to come back in terms of the sustainable transport, fire crews would obviously be attending on the fire engines as well, obviously, and car sharing where they can. So just to cover that point. In terms of landscaping, obviously, we do want to seek a protected buffer, so that would be as part of the detailed landscaping scheme that would come back before us, and we would be engaging heavily with our landscaping services who have already highlighted the particular species that we may need to provide that buffer. With respect to lighting, could we bring it perhaps if we could have it till 10 o'clock but then have the informative on. Obviously, if they're not using it at any time, obviously then it could be switched off, as you've suggested. Obviously, I think it's just to give them, obviously, whilst they may not be using a facility per se, they would probably need a little bit of time to clear off the site. So if we could have that, but then obviously we can put the informative on there that if it's not in operation, you know, that particular evening, for example, in the dark, then obviously we can, they can just turn lights off where necessary, if that's okay.
I'd prefer 9:30 because we'd normally allow half an hour. Is there any reason why we'd go an hour?
I think we could go to 9:30.
Yeah, 9:30 plus an informative. Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Good compromise, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Spear.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I think that it's very important to remember on this at Calverton Park that is already established, obviously, in this usage and has been for many years. And it has an advantage, I think, to be in the situation where it is, i.e. close to the A12, because let's not forget, this is going to be more than a training station. If there is any emergency of a national or biological measure, it is important that there are no planning conditions that restrict the usage of this for the safety of the people. So regardless of what goes on there tonight, I think we need to acknowledge the fact that should there be any form of national or area of emergency, they need to have the flexibility to turn on and off the lights when they want to make as much noise as they like and do what they like to protect the people. Because this is a centre of excellence and they have got an emergency services duty to the people. And I think that's really important. But apart from that, I think the whole design of it, as Councillor Abbott mentioned, what was really good is potentially moving the footpaths, public rights of way into the areas concerned, so that they have got that no distraction within and people going through it, obviously, because again, that's important from not only environmental factor, but also a safety factor. So overall, and I think this, as Councillor Abbott has mentioned, and you've mentioned with regards to the condition to the landscaping, especially from the other way, is really good. But I think that we need to be a bit careful about imposing conditions on an emergency service that is here to serve all the people locally, but actually in the country as well, and the fantastic job that they all do. So I appreciate the comments, but we must have that agility for emergency services at all times. Thank you.
Come back on that point.
In terms of the opening hours, obviously it wouldn't affect obviously the existing facilities on site at the moment, which obviously I think benefit from, you know, receiving calls and things. It would just relate to the live fire facility in terms of the restrictions, obviously, which is for training purposes only.
No, I totally understand that, but there may be a situation where even the emergency services are called upon, the firemen may be in the middle of training, and there may be a situation where they have got to have operational capacity at any time of day or night, as long as that is not conditioned. Obviously, I presume there's an automatic override on that because it's a centre of excellence anyway. That's my only concern. The normal sort of training and operational day-to-day, of course, is not an issue, but I presume, I'm not, because I don't know, is that granted by a higher law because of a centre of excellence?
So, Councillor Spear, it's a good point. Obviously, but the reason we were just debating is before Janine responded, was acknowledging that point that obviously it's a operational facility. It has to be able to operate. I think if in the context of there was a national safety issue that needs to be addressed or a local, whatever the issue was, if there was an emergency situation, the reality is, as the planning authority, we are not going to be subsequently seeking to enforce a breach of condition in those circumstances. So that's where, as the planning authority, we have the discretion as to whether or not we take enforcement action or not. I suppose the point of the various conditions is around the day-to-day, the normal use of the site and how it would operate, which obviously has been subject to discussion with the applicant prior to the publication of the committee agenda. So in those circumstances to which you're raising the concern, that the planning condition itself wouldn't, and we would not expect that to override the operational needs of the fire service in that emergency situation. So hopefully that answers your concern.
Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Just say I've got no problem at all with this application. Absolutely agree with the comments made by Councillor Schwer. But also just to add that the applicant did come to Members Forum just a few weeks ago, gave a really excellent presentation which enabled them to go into quite a lot of detail. I mean, it got quite technical, just especially for some of us, but it was very good about the purpose behind this, what they want to do on the site. And I think that was really, really helpful. It actually demonstrated the usefulness of the forum that they were able to do. And I think they got a lot of questions on that evening, which they were all happy to answer. So, yeah, I'm fully supportive of this. Thank you.
Any other member wish to make any comments? Councillor Beevers, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly, I reiterate that I thought it was a really helpful planning forum, actually, and quite a few bits came out of it. For example, members were worried about that sort of plume and whether that was going to cause an issue for drivers, and I think it's all been addressed there, and by and large it's a well supported and set out report, and I think having it here as a centre of excellence is better than being split between two sites, because Wethersfield, and I live quite closely to it really, where I am in Sybil Headingham, it's not the best actually in terms of if there was an emergency getting people off of that. So I think all of that's right, and I did remember also that they were talking about some of the equipment's got to be moved out of Wethersfield and will come here as well. So for us locally, that's something to look out for when we think about this planning. What I just want to say is I appreciate, and I've actually worked out of the site over the years, and I've always enjoyed being there, and I think the site's really nicely set out actually. But it does talk about this historic piece around the Bronze Age and the cremations, and also the cemetery as well. And I just wonder whether something could be picked up around this to actually, I mean, they might find other artefacts, that's in the report as well, but it is quite an important site in its own right, and I just hope that one day it's not all going to be built over and forgotten. I mean, I can't remember from when I've worked there whether there is anything that reflects what's gone on this site, but I just think it's quite important, really, to be picked up. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Condition 11 on page 191 does require a written scheme of investigation to be submitted. So obviously, yeah, that would account for any archaeology findings that are on there.
Okay, Councillor
Abbott. Just a couple of comments, then I'll move. Yes, the local joke is we're hoping to find Boadicea's chariot somewhere along there, because that is the old original coast of the London Road, you see. We haven't found it yet. Maybe this is it. No, I'm happy to move officer recommendation, Madam Chairman, with the revised condition details and the informative and the steer to try and get the landscaping as good as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. The seconder, Councillor Spray. All those in favour of granting this application with those amendments? So it's unanimous. Thank you, members. That application is granted. We'll now move on to the next application this evening. This is application number 5, item 5D on your agenda. It's application number 25/02202 VAR, land at North East Witham Forest Road, Witham. We are also going to have a single presentation covering the next application, which is item 5E. This is application number 02203 there, which is phase 2 Land at Forest Road, Witham. So we're going to have one presentation because the issues are pretty similar in both, but we will then have a separate votes. And we have no speakers, so straight over to Neil.
Good evening, members. Thank you. So, start off with the first application, 25-02202 VAR. So, this is an application to remove conditions 6 and 7, which require the developer to carry out off-site highway works in connection with development land at North East Witham. So, this first application, this goes back to 2015 when it was originally granted the outline permission. So this covered the whole of the site at North East Witham. So this was the original application site. So Forest Road running along here, and then this was partly agricultural land, partly part of the Rivenhall Oaks Golf Club. So this was the whole site originally back in 2015, and it was envisaged that there were going to be 2 phases at the time. So there was going to be phase 1, which we had a detailed application for in 2015, which was approved. And then there was an outline permission for this side over here. So what subsequently happened, as we've set out in the committee report, when phase 2 came forward, the developer actually elected to make a full application for this part. So they had outline permission. They decided that the site could be used more efficiently with a slightly higher number of dwellings. So all of these, the conditions and the highway works, all relate to this one development. The reason that we've got 2 separate applications is we've got the phase 1 is covered by one planning application originally, so that's where conditions 6 and 7 come in, and then phase 2 over here has a separate planning permission, although it relates to some of the same highway works. So that was the reason that we thought we would try and deal with it as one presentation, because it's effectively one development and one set of works. It's just spread across 2 different applications. So the works in question, there was one set of works at the Morrison's roundabout. So this is the drawing that we had originally. So this is the roundabout, not surprisingly, by Morrison's, an imaginatively named roundabout. So you can see this is the access coming down to the supermarket here. This is the old Braintree Road over here. This is the Braintree District Council car park on the corner here. This is the B1018, sort of coming from the centre of Witham and then going out towards Rickstones Road and then out towards Braintree. So the idea was, the County Council's idea, I should say, the Highway Authority's idea was that a slip road or a filter lane be constructed here. So rather than all the traffic coming up to the roundabout on the B1018 and stopping here and moving on, that there'd be a filter lane constructed here, so that if you were moving towards Braintree, you would come down the filter lane and then merge back in with the traffic beyond the roundabout here. So the thinking being from the Highway Authority was that this would create some additional capacity at the roundabout, which would help mitigate the additional traffic which will be created as a result of the development. And we'll just show you some photos. So this is where the filter lane would have come. So this is coming from the town. It would have come through here, through the sort of green sward next to the roundabout, over this drive to some properties down here. You can just see their driveway down the hill there, then through the verge over here, and then merge back in with the traffic up here. And that would have resulted in the parking bays, which are used by some of the properties which don't have off-street parking as well. So that was the scheme which the County Council, the Highway Authority, encouraged Bellway to look at, and Bellway, the developer at the time, agreed to the condition. What subsequently happened was Bellway proceeded after the application was approved to draw up the technical design and carry out safety audits. And it was at that stage that the County Highway Authority actually turned around and said, as a result of the safety audits, they weren't satisfied that it was a safe highway operation, and they refused the Highway Works agreement which Bellway was seeking to get. So we had a situation where we had a planning condition which had been put on at the request of the Highway Authority, which the Highway Authority then refused to allow the developer to comply with. So that happened, if I'm honest, some years ago, and we've been trying to find a solution to the matter ever since, and that's what's led to the application now. So that was one set of the works. So the other set of works which was covered were what's called pre-signal lights at the Chipping Hill junction. So again, we're further along the B1018, so the Morrison's roundabout's just further up here. This is Chipping Hill and the roundabout here. And the idea with this, again, which was requested by the Highway Authority at the time, was to install pre-signal or part-time traffic lights just on this arm here. So if you were coming towards the roundabout at peak times, and again to try and create some additional capacity on the B1018, the lights on a sensor could turn to red, hold the traffic here at Chipping Hill, and then the traffic going across the roundabout on the B1018 would have greater priority because it wouldn't be giving way to any traffic coming in from Chipping Hill. And that again was to try and create a bit of additional capacity, again to mitigate the impact of the development. Just some photos. So this is the Chipping Hill arm. So the traffic lights signals would have been just back down here. So the queue would have been back down there. And then this is just the B1018, or looking up towards the B1018, sorry, and then across. So this scheme has been designed and has been approved by Essex County Council. The design was finally sorted out earlier this year. At that time, we were looking to resolve the issue with the Morrison's roundabout, and Bellway asked Essex officers and Braintree officers whether they wanted to reconsider the Chipping Hill lights. So Bellway were in a position where they could have delivered the lights, were about to let the contract, I think, for the civil engineer to do it. But the cost was obviously known at that point, and Bellway asked the councils or officers to consider whether this was still something that was considered necessary, appropriate, and the best use of that money. So officers considered the potential benefits from it, looked at the transport assessment which was carried out back in 2015, which is obviously quite old, but also the more recent transport assessment which they carried out as part of the Phase 4 development, which looked at highway capacity. Whilst the lights could provide some additional capacity, the benefit is not clear. It certainly wouldn't have a significant impact on, in officers' views, wouldn't have a significant impact, and we weren't convinced that the cost of installing the lights for the benefit was actually the best use of that money. Now, if I just move on, just to look at this, so this is obviously a situation where we've granted a planning permission based on some off-site works, and as I'm presenting it to you, it obviously doesn't sound good that those off-site works aren't being provided. I think in terms of context, it's important to remember that there was a package of works which came about as a result of the Phase 1, Phase 2 developments. So previously, along Forest Road, so from the site over here up to Rickstones Road, there wasn't a footway. So as part of that development, the footway was put in at the developer's expense. So that has been delivered and has been some time. So that improves connectivity towards the local schools. There were a set of works carried out on the B1018 further along from the Morrison's roundabout. So we were just down here a moment ago. So this used to be a roundabout at the junction with Cypress Road. So again, to try and look at increasing capacity on the B1018, this scheme took the roundabout out, put a filter lane in, again to try and create additional traffic on the B1018. So that scheme has been delivered and was some time ago. And there was also a footway, cycleway created to provide a link to Motts Lane and then onto Cutthroat Lane. So the development site is just up over the top corner of this picture here. So through an open space which the District Council owns, so this length here, so you can just see on Google Earth here, a foot cycleway is being put in which comes down to Motts Lane. So that provides a connection to the Bridleway Bridge over the railway line, which connects onto the employment uses over here, and also to Cutthroat Lane here, which has very limited vehicle use and provides a really strong active travel corridor towards the railway station or on towards the railway station. So there was a package of works overall. Some of the highway works haven't been completed, the others all have been. What we didn't want to do was have a situation where the works were not required and there was no other benefits delivered in lieu. So what we considered was, and have negotiated, is a financial contribution from the developer which reflects the cost of carrying out those works. And the proposal is that those monies are used to provide additional cycling and pedestrian improvements, broadly speaking, between the development site and the town centre. So there's already some really good links there for walking and cycling, but there's some potential for further improvements. So the Morrison's roundabout, that was costed at, well, it's just over £100,000. The developer incurred some fairly significant costs going through technical design through no fault of their own for a scheme which they weren't able to deliver. So there's £100,000 being offered plus indexation in terms of the Morrison's roundabout, and that's the scheme that can't be delivered. And then in terms of the Chipping Hill lights, the cost of that is just under £270,000. So in total, what we have been offered by the developer is a contribution of £369,733 plus indexation from 2 different points depending on where the calculations were made. And the proposal is that those monies can then be used to fund pedestrian and cycle improvements to further encourage active travel. So the intention is to further try and reduce reliance on private car, particularly for short journeys. The benefit will be not just to residents of the development, but also for people living in this part of Whittam. So we do think it is providing an additional form of mitigation, an alternative form of mitigation to the highway capacity that was originally proposed. There was also, and separately to the conditions, a Section 106 contribution which was secured for cycle parking at the railway station. There's been some issues around what that money was originally intended to be provided for. There's still going to be some cycle parking provided at the station, but we don't need this particular contribution from the developer. So what we've agreed, or what we're proposing, is that the Section 106 is varied, so that A, we capture the contribution for the highway works they aren't providing, but also the £15,000 that we secured for cycle parking at the station can also be repurposed either for cycle parking within the town centre or to further pedestrian and cycle links which are identified in the Whittam Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. So that, members might remember, is the plan that the District Council have paid to have drawn up by external consultants to look at, to identify walking and cycling opportunities or corridors within the town, and to look at ways that that can be improved. So that's what we're proposing with regards to the 106. And then just very quickly, just to come back to that point about the second application. So members will need to make a decision on both applications separately. So the second application for that phase 2 development I mentioned earlier, that also had a condition which required the improvements of the Chipping Hill lights. So this is in connection with the phase 2 development over here. So we're not, in terms of that 269,000, that is the cost of the lights. They were only required to put in one set of lights as a result of the conditions on both parts of the development. So it's one lot of 269,000 plus the 100,000 from the Morrison's work. So we just wanted to clarify that, because I think the Town Council's comments were they weren't clear whether those contributions were the same or separate. So for various reasons, as I've tried to explain, there's been issues with these off-site highway works and getting to a position where they're either agreed or where we can report on members to them about whether they should be delivered or not. So whilst they're not providing the highway works and highway capacity improvements that were originally envisaged, we do think it's still, the proposal is still consistent with the NPPF in terms of promoting active travel, which is very much the direction of travel with the NPPF, and indeed what we've tried to promote through the phase 4 development at North East Whittam as well. So we're asking for a resolution to grant both the applications, so 2202 and 2203, which would remove the various planning conditions for the Morrisons and the Chipping Hill works, and also to change the 106 so that we can spend the money on the purposes that we've referred to. So that's the recommendation. I think procedurally there'll need to be a vote on each, but we thought it was easier to try and present them both together because they are essentially the same issue. So hopefully that was helpful. But also, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and help. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I think that's quite clear. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, I strongly support this, and I won't say some of the things I was going to say about the County Council because it's a family show. Could you please put back up the plan of the Morrisons roundabout? Yeah. So I was the county councillor at the time for Witton Northern, which included this area, and I spoke directly to the county council and said that that scheme would not be workable. I told the officer who wrote it to his face it would not be workable. And the same officer, I also said in regard to both this site and other Bellway sites, so we're up to phase 4 now, but at that time we were only 1 and 2, but including phase 3, which came afterwards, we need a crossing of Rickstones Road so that all these children who will be living in these houses on these various Bellway phases can safely cross Rickstones Road to get to 2 primary schools, a special school, a nursery and a secondary school academy. And he turned me down every single time. And I thought that was remarkable. So the reason why the Morrison scheme is not workable, that little diagonal bit on the left hand side, that is a pedestrian crossing of the road. So the first thing you do if you built that is people would be crossing 3 lines of traffic, and I'll tell you at peak time you'd take your life in your hands crossing 2, crossing 3. It would have truncated the private access to the houses. There's a dip there to the left, and there's those private houses. It would have truncated their access and made it a lot more dangerous for them to come in and out. And it would have resulted in the loss of the permit parking for the houses that front onto the B1018, and you would have had 2 lines of traffic converging onto a zebra crossing. And I said all those things to him at the time, and he just completely ignored the local knowledge that myself and anyone else had. So I'm not surprised we're back here now, and the perversity is of course that the County Council proposed this scheme, and I made a note. The report says the applicant's traffic work did not suggest this. It came from the County Council. And then the County Council, when it gets to audit stage, turn around and say it's not deliverable. Absolutely remarkable, all that time and money wasted. The other point is, of course, that, and Witton Town Council make this point about traffic in the town growing. It is. So what we're talking about here is providing mitigation. Now, we shouldn't use language about reducing. We're not going to be reducing anything. The traffic in Witton's getting worse and worse year by year. Peak time, it's solid along the B118 both ways. And of course this would have done nothing to help the morning traffic, which tends to come south. It just would have created a more dangerous situation for the evening traffic going north, which tends to be the broad flow. So I'm really pleased this has been dropped, but really angry as to how we've got to where we are, and that local requests were completely ignored. On the Chipping Hill traffic lights, I agree with officers up to a point. I mean, it can back up down to the church, but it tends not to routinely. And so the question is there, is it worth spending all that money to deal with a situation which doesn't happen that much? So now I've had my rant, Madam Chairman. I'd strongly support this, but I would like to suggest a change to what we're proposing. That crossing is needed, and it's actually I got it onto the LHP lists, but I don't. When I came off county in 21, I don't know what happened to it then. But it's an identified officers at county have agreed we need to have a crossing of Rickstones Road. Yeah, and the officers said about the path that was built along Forest Road to the schools. That's something we asked for. I can remember talking to developers and saying, could you put a path in along Forest Road? And then it was agreed. But currently that path takes you to Rickstones Road, and then there's no crossing for the children. And anyone who knows that area, it is chaos, particularly in the evenings, with parking all over the place, children going between cars, no safe crossing. So I'm just wondering, while strongly supporting this, if we could just add possibly even 1 or 2 words to say that one of the benefits could be pedestrian access to local schools, because that would then give us the flexibility to possibly put some of this money towards that crossing.
Is this in the section 106 you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're quite right about all of that, Councillor Abbott. The point about Rickstones Road, so the Phase 4 development, which the developer has currently started, there was a package of works secured around that, which includes a crossing on Rickstones Road. So the Phase 4 development, and I think the developer has already started the discussion with the county officers about the location of the crossing and the design. So that's in train. So we shouldn't have to rely on this 106 money to provide that. So I think hopefully...
Is it an actual formal crossing or a crossing point? It's an actual zebra crossing?
Yeah.
And do you think it'll be in that location?
In terms of the 106 obligation, there is, I think there's an A and a B on a plan. So an A is I'm trying to remember exactly where it is. I think up where the Rectory Lane comes through, and then the B is down by where the school is. So there'll be a point between the two, which will be determined by the developer and the Highway Authority, which will have a formal crossing point.
Well, so I'm aware of all that, but the reason I'm raising it, sorry, Madam Chair, it goes into a bit of local detail, but if it's down the Rectory Lane end, children are not going to walk all the way down to Rectory Lane to walk all the way back up Rickstones Road again. The crossing needs to be at the top of Forest Road. That's where most of them come out to cross. The school's opposite. It's bang there. So there's nothing we can do via this to steer that.
Well, I can't guarantee it. So that's what the 106 requires at the moment. The discussions that I've been told about between the developer and the Highway Authority is that it would be at the Forest Road end. There was a scheme which Essex had drawn up, so I'm not quite sure whether that was as a result of the LHP when you were on it or subsequently. I think that for some reason is in a slightly different position to where Bellway were looking at providing it. So we've gone back to Bellway, or sorry, County have gone back to Bellway and said, this is where we would prefer to see it. It's still at the Forest Road end, it's just in a slightly different position. I haven't got agreement yet, or I haven't heard that there's been agreement yet on that. But whilst the 106 doesn't require it, it is at the Forest Road end that they're looking to provide it.
All right, thank you for that. Final word I'll say is just to bear in mind that where that crossing is will inevitably be partly in Rivenhall Parish. So I've got the map here if you wanted to check it. So we will, from the Rivenhall perspective, from my perspective as a ward councillor, we would like to be kept in the loop if possible, please. It's not solely within Whitton, that's what I'm trying. But thank you for that reassurance.
I'll make the note and ask the Highway Authority to make a note of that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Anybody else would like to make a comment on this? No, in that case, Councillor Abbott. To move that then to final seconder, please, Councillor Monday. All those in favour? Okay, that again is unanimous. Okay, thanks, members. Sorry, that actually will that should be on the first one. This is item 5D. So this is the application 25/02202. So we'll need to have a second vote as well. Councillor Abbott can move, Councillor Finken seconded, and all those in favour of that. Okay, we have that is unanimous on that one as well. That's item 5E, the application 25/2203. Okay, so that brings us now to the last application this evening. This is item 5F on the agenda. It's application number 25/02312 HH 14 Warren Road, Braintree. Chris is going to run us through this one.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So last item on the agenda, an application for a single-storey rear extension. Just for clarity, this application is being reported for probity reasons as the applicant is related to a member of staff within the planning department. So I'll just take you through the proposals. Apologies, there we go. So we have the location of the site, so a semi-detached dwelling on Warren Road in Braintree, existing block plan. The proposed block plan shows the rear extension. You can see there's a couple of outbuildings to the rear as well, but the floor plans show it in a little bit more detail. So on the left-hand side shows the existing arrangement with a single-storey projection from the rear of the dwelling, and on the right-hand side we have the proposed floor plan with an extended projection coming off of the full width of the property. My understanding is the existing extension would be demolished and it would be replaced by this new structure. In terms of elevations, so again on the left you can see the existing rear elevation, and then you have the side profile of it. So typical sort of type of extension for this size and scale of property. And then the proposed. So on the left hand side again you can see the rear elevation, so a pitched roof coming down. It's slightly L-shaped in plan form, so that's why the roof projects slightly lower on the right hand side, and then you have the side profile as well. A couple of photos. So a photo from the front of the site, so you can see the existing garage to the rear. What this also shows is there is a good sort of separation between the adjacent property that has a similar sort of drive and garage arrangement to the rear. View from the back, so this is looking across to the neighbour, so the neighbouring, the adjoining property has an existing single-storey extension. You can see the pebble dash on the left-hand side is the existing rear projection from the application site, so this would be removed and it would project slightly further along the boundary. A view back over to the other side, so again this is standing effectively in front of the garage looking across to the adjacent neighbour, so again you can see that sort of separation distance. And then a look from the rear of the site back, so again this is looking at the rear elevation of the application site, and again you can just see on the right hand side there the existing rear projection and the sloping roof. Just another picture. So it's recommended to grant Planning Commission in this particular case. The design, size and scale of the extension is in keeping with the existing property. The proposal doesn't raise any concerns in relation to relationship to adjacent properties in terms of overlooking, overbearing or loss of natural light, and it's recommended for approval on that basis, Madam Chairman, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Anybody got any questions or comments they'd like to make? In which case, could somebody move officer's recommendation? Councillor Diamond, seconder. Councillor Monday, all those in favour of granting this? That is unanimous again. Okay, thank you very much, members. That brings us to the end of our meeting this evening at 10:10. No, 9:50.